Vikings trying to get healthy on a short week, but will it be enough to paper over the problems that cost him the Lions game? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so very much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, each and every day. Hashtag everydayers. I appreciate you all more than I could ever let you know. If you are new here, hello and welcome. You can find the show wherever you find your favorite podcasts Monday through Friday. Just search it out. You can also find the show on YouTube or Amazon Fire and Roku. Just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. It is Twitter Tuesday today. That means I'm answering your questions as provided to me via Twitter or via the Google form, which is linked in every episode in the show notes, or just via email at lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com. First question I am going to take, there are a lot of questions to this effect, but the first one is from Connor M., who asks, is the Lions game an example of how big an impact Cashman makes? Do you think if he played, he could have changed the outcome of one or two major plays? A lot of people asked, especially after the dagger thing that I did on yesterday's show, if Blake Cashman would maybe be the guy, maybe would possibly be somebody that could help take away dagger. And it makes sense. He's an inside linebacker in some kind of hook zone. Maybe he'd be the guy underneath the dagger. Sometimes, I guess, is the answer here. The reason everybody's asking about this, of course, Blake Cashman's dealing with turf toe. It sounds like he is not going to be ready for Thursday night's game against the Rams, at least the way the coaches are talking about it. And he's the only one that was like a true DNP on the Vikings estimated injury report from Monday. They didn't practice, but they estimated who would have practiced. Everybody else was at least limited. Of course, Hawkinson and Reisner possibly coming off of their 21-day window before this game is something that everybody's keeping an eye on as well. We'll get into a lot of Hawkinson stuff later. But for Cashman, I swear to God, I got 6 or 7 versions of this exact question, is what impact does Cashman make? There is a ranginess and just some playmaker ability that he could just kind of go in and blow a couple up that maybe Kamu Grugier-Hill doesn't do. The problem with this at like a linebacker level is a lot of times dagger, you're waiting for a window to open up. So that linebacker can play exactly the way he's supposed to, which is to, sit at a landmark, relate to eyes, but they're only so wide of a person. And therefore they can only take away so much of a throwing lane. And there's going to be a window between the linebackers, no matter how good your linebackers are. That's just part of it, which is why safeties need to get involved. In terms of this whole dagger thing, we'll answer a lot of questions later in the show about it. But also, I have an article at Wide Left where I showed some film of exactly what I'm talking about here and how it kind of counters the Vikings coverages and maybe what the Vikings can do to set themselves up for a little bit more success. For now, let's turn to the other side of the ball. And take one from Grill, who asks, does Sam Darnold have to release the ball earlier? Are routes taking too long to develop? I guess the way I'll answer this is I would love to see the Vikings offense operate a little faster, both pre and post snap, but you're talking about post snap. I would love to see them go a little faster. I don't know if that's the fault of anyone's execution. A lot of these plays are Sam Darnold doing play pass, 7-step drop, hitch, read through a whole progression, throw. That's a lot of stuff, and that puts a huge strain on the offensive line. That allows coverages to really diagnose what's going on. It allows people to, cornerbacks to recover if they lose off of the release. There are a lot of downsides to that. Obviously, the upsides are you get to push the ball downfield more. You get to give your receivers more time to work with so that they can run fancier routes, which for somebody like Justin Jefferson, very effective. There's pros and cons just like there are to everything, and the Vikings have chosen this. So I would love for the Vikings to chill out on that a little bit and work in more quick concepts. But I don't think necessarily Sam being too slow is the biggest issue, but it does show up like sometimes. I don't think it's not an issue at all. On that note, a question from Bad Dad Joke, who asks, with TJ Hawkinson's comeback likely happening this week, what facets of his game or role in the offense are you most looking forward to, and why is it why choice? So the whole Vikings beat seems to think that TJ Hawkinson's coming back this game. I will see. I mean, I don't know any more than you do, so we'll have to see. But assuming that he does, assuming the beat is right about that, why choice is a huge one because it is quick game that also pushes the ball downfield. It gives you you can read it the other way and have like a shot play with choice coming underneath as like the kind of the second read or even the third read with, somebody slower, like a tight end, like Hawkinson, but still a very good route runner so he can get separation. But because he runs it a little slower, you have time to read something else first. And that makes it a really good third and long play. That's why the Vikings like it a lot on third and long. I love why choice, using him in bunches and all of this other stuff will really help. A lot of you asked questions about TJ Hawkinson. So let's get to those. Max asks, when I was watching the game, it seemed to me that the game plan they had come out with was put together based around having TJ Hawkinson available. Saw a lot of Johnny Munt targets in the way that they used to use Hawkinson last year. Am I wrong? So my understanding is that the way that the Vikings came out on offense, I don't think they had a particularly different game plan than they've had all year. And their structure has sort of divided what TJ Hawkinson used to do into a bunch of roles. Johnny Munt does a lot of it, but they'll have underneath receivers do some of the catch and run stuff. They've had CJ Ham do some of it. They've had obviously Josh Oliver do some of it, but also Brandon Powell, Jordan Addison, Jalen Naylor has done some of that stuff as well, and even Justin Jefferson running some of the routes that would usually go to Hawkinson. So they've sort of divided it up. The next question actually pertains to this. Sketch Conk asks, what are some specific things you expect them to ask Hawkinson to do when he returns that Munt and Oliver can't/aren't asked to do? The answer isn't like that there isn't another player on the team that can do this specific thing or that specific thing. It's that Hawkinson does all of them, right? Hawkinson runs routes in a way that Munt and Oliver cannot do. And he blocks in a way that Trent Sherfield can't. When Trent Sherfield's the other guy trying to crack down, or that somebody like CJ Ham, there's a rep in this one that's a toss to a double tight end side, strong side toss with two tight ends there. But instead of two actual tight ends, it's Josh Oliver and CJ Ham. Josh Oliver pancakes his guy. CJ Ham can't get the reach because he's a fullback. He's out of position there. And I think they were just trying to get like some personnel mismatches going by lining up in a weird formation out of a weird personnel on that one. And it doesn't work because CJ Ham doesn't win his block. That's something that in a real game you could probably feel as Hawkinson. So a lot of different people are doing things that you kind of say, that probably would be Hawkinson if he were in. And in all of those cases, you'd like rather that guy be Hawkinson. So hopefully that can help them simplify personnel a little bit, and it can help them have a jack of all trades to really run a lot of these concepts through. Adam Kleinsaucer asks, should we have gone for a 73-yard field goal? Under 70, I would have said, heck yeah. I don't know about 73, though. My head and my heart are at odds here. My heart says swing that thing. But so if you missed it, Kevin O'Connell actually addressed this as well and said that they probably would have sent him out at 68, but because of the illegal formation penalty, that knocked him back 5 more yards. It was 73. And he kind of chuckled and said, yeah, that's just outside his range. So I got to think that they would go for like 69 or 70, but 73 was just a little bit too long. And I think the odds of that are a lot lower than the odds of being able to get a quick 8 yards spike and then set up a more makeable field goal. The odds of that are minuscule, but so are the odds of a Hail Mary. So I don't know if this decision really matters. I think it's all a whole bunch of unlikely stuff, and pick your flavor. I've got a lot of questions about the dagger thing. You guys have a lot of follow-ups from yesterday's episode, which I really appreciate, plus some other stuff miscellaneous about the Vikings. So we will continue on next up. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel is a great place to go gamble on the Minnesota Vikings. That line for the Vikings and Rams has been all over the place as the day has worn on and we learn more about injury reports with Cooper Kupp coming back. Right now, Vikings favored by 3 on the road. So if you're into that, or if you want to maybe hedge against it, over-under is 48.5. Whole bunch of other things in that game that you can maybe go take a look at. Such as featured same-game parlays or things like Aaron Jones or Justin Jefferson as an anytime touchdown scorer, whatever you want. You can put $5 down on it and get $200 back in bonus bets, guaranteed. Whether that bet wins or loses, $200 in bonus bets for a $5 bet. That's 40-1 odds. Bam, guaranteed, and it doesn't even have to be a smart bet. So go to FanDuel.com, get those $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Once again, that is FanDuel.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs is the best place to find your company's next hire. So whether you are managing hiring for a bigger firm or whether you're a small business owner trying to do everything yourself, LinkedIn understands that you have a lot going on and maybe you can't dedicate your entire day to the process of hiring. That's a lot of resumes and a lot of people to sift through, and it's a lot of people on LinkedIn. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring, and everybody's on LinkedIn. It's more than just a job board. It's practically a professionally slanted social media, and 70% of the people on LinkedIn aren't even actively looking for jobs on other boards. So if you want the actual true candidate pool, you have to go to LinkedIn, maybe find somebody that's not actively looking, but your job is perfect for them, and maybe they would take the opportunity. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Moving right along here with this Twitter Tuesday episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast. Check out patreon.com/LukeBrownNFL. By the way, I'll have a couple of videos, maybe one, maybe two coming out. It's a short week. We'll see how I do. But of course, everything from the Jets game is now free to watch. So go check it out. Patreon.com/LukeBrownNFL. The next series of questions is all about Dagger. So if you didn't listen to yesterday's episode, I laid a lot of the groundwork for the ideas that I had about why the Vikings struggle so much with Dagger. I actually pulled some stats, put it in an article at Wide Left. So go check all that out if you want more of a deep dive. But here are the questions. Jish Fish asks, this was obviously a known issue last year. Why did it take until week 7 this year for it to be mega exploited again? And I think the answer to that question is a couple of teams tried to run Dagger a lot and got a few. Everybody's been, I think, just trying to dial in the right amount to call. If you call it twice, that's not enough. You call it, 15 times, that maybe isn't enough diversity. And then some of these quarterbacks have just failed. Jordan Love just failed. He had a lot of opportunities on Dagger, a lot of open guys down the field that he could not get to, whether it was his fault or not. Maybe it was because the protection broke down, or maybe it was because he, was scrambling around and playing hero ball too much when he could have maybe gotten rid of it. Or sometimes he just threw up moon balls that didn't take advantage of the Dagger concept at all, but maybe they did work or maybe they didn't, depending on whose lap they fell in. Jared Goff played a much better game with better timing. So it was better executed by the Lions, but everybody's been running Dagger on the Vikings a lot. Like, this is not a secret. Everybody has been doing it, and it has been giving up, big plays down the field. But I think especially in games like the Giants game or the Texans game, we just don't really care because we were up by so much. That is whatever. But it has definitely been one of the biggest sources of yards, at least in the Lions and Packers games, which I manually charted the Dagger reps for those ones because that was what I was writing about, averaging like 100 a game on just Dagger. You're giving up 100 a game on just that one passing concept, and it's on like 5 or 10 reps. Like, it's remarkably efficient to run Dagger against the Vikings. Same guy, Jish Fish as well, also asks, how much of this can be chalked up to Detroit having the perfect personnel to execute this game plan? Similarly, Spam Dagger Enthusiast asks, looking at our remaining schedule, what teams do you think have the O-line, QB, and wide receiver combination required to execute what the Lions pulled off on Sunday? So, with regard to Dagger, here's what I think you need. I do think you need a quarterback that can, kind of hang in a pocket with a lot of pressure coming and deliver a ball over the middle. That's not everybody. There are a lot of quarterbacks that very famously won't throw over the middle, right? The Russell Wilson forever, Justin Fields, those kinds of guys. Jared Goff loves throwing over the middle. That's not going to be an issue for them, but that's one kind of, I guess, like deadbolt that can just lock teams out of doing this. Another one is you have to have some speed. I would say you have to have average speed at wide receiver. You just can't be really slow. And you can even be really slow on average, but as long as you have a guy that's fast enough to clear out a safety and make him take you seriously, and a guy that can run a dig route by the time you're at the top of a five-step drop, which at the NFL level is pretty common. So you need average speed at wide receiver. And with regard to O-line, you don't need to have the Lions O-line. You don't need to be the best O-line in the league. You can protect 8. You can bring 7 or 8 guys into protection and block up these blitzes that way and have everybody in a double team and have lots of help from your running backs, and your guard can get smoked as much as he wants because skill players are going to come in and save the day. So I don't know. I think most teams have the ability to go max protect and the personnel that they would need to go max protect. I think many teams have average wide receiver speed. And I think a few teams that are on the Vikings schedule maybe don't have a guy that's willing to throw over the middle to dagger because it is a middle throw. But I don't know if I would necessarily call that like a rarity. What teams maybe don't have all 3, maybe only have 2 or 3. I don't know. I mean, I could sit here and go through the schedule or anything, but I don't think, like, part of my concern is that that's not that hard of an ask. That you're basically asking for like 3 average position groups, and so long as nobody is so bad that they're holding the team back, which I think in ways the Jets were, I think in ways the Packers had stuff that on that offense that was going so poorly in that game that it held them back. That I think that they can get it. The Lions, I think, are very well coached and executed it very well. But I think you can get away with executing it a little bit less precisely and probably still get your opportunities. Ryan asks, pass rush stats-wise seemed to be great yesterday, but Goff was barely affected. What's up? So this is part of the good execution. Because if you can go 5-step drop throw, pressure's just not going to get there. Even though, and it depends on what pressure you're talking about. PFF charts it differently from SIS or Next Gen Stats. So it depends on what pressure you're talking about. But a lot of like charted pressures are like, I guess the answer is Jared Goff overcame pressure, and he's been like one of the best in the league against pressure. But the way he does that is by getting rid of the ball before the pressure affects those throws. And some outlets will then therefore call it not a pressure, but a lot of them will call it a pressure and say good job under pressure. It's a weird statistical thing. So you might be seeing, things get charted as a pressure, but they don't feel like one. Because Jared Goff just did a good job. Hitman Stan asks, how can the Vikings capitalize on opposing offenses going max protect? More sim pressure, or do they need different personnel? Sim pressure would be a great way to bait a team into going max protect, and then backing off it with 7 or even 8 in coverage, essentially eschew the pass rush entirely and hope that because they only have 2 or 3 routes going downfield, if you have a lot of coverage resources, a full-fledged coverage, and they only have to cover 2 guys, you kind of hope that can hold up on the back end. And then even with, a 3-on-7 disadvantage or a 4-on-7 disadvantage, someone eventually squirts through, or that you can force the quarterback into a check down or a throwaway and kind of get your down back that way. But the real downside of max protect is that you have fewer routes. So you're going to have to get really late in the down, and that really doesn't work against like particularly creative quarterbacks, guys that thrive late in the down. Like I wouldn't really want to do that, to employ that strategy against like the Bears and Caleb Williams. Like I don't want him to go to where he's comfortable, which is late in the down. Against somebody like Kirk, when they play Atlanta week 14, I actually would love to get him late in the down. I think that's when some of the stupidest Kirk stuff can happen. James K asks, along with being known for blitzing, Flores also has a reputation for calling tons of different coverages. What looks can he switch to mitigate the effectiveness of dagger? So this is one of the biggest topics I went over in the article at Wide Left, but my, official suggestion is to find a way to rotate middle of field open looks into cover 3 more. They are 28th in the league in cover 3 usage right now. They are first in the league in split safety usage. Balance that out a little bit. I love the way that they disguise everything. I love the way that they rotate to everything. And I think they have the rangy kinds of players. Cashman coming back is one of them, but also Metellus, Byron Murphy, Bynum. A lot of these players in the secondary, even Van Ginkel backing off, are really good at starting somewhere and ending up somewhere else. They've clearly built a defensive roster that wants to be good at that and that specifically. Problem with cover 3 is it asks a lot more of your corners than I think the Vikings are comfortable with. And I would imagine that if you ask them with truth serum, why aren't you running as much cover 3 as everyone else? They would say, because we don't want to put that on our corners, on Gilmore and Griffin. We don't really think that they're up to that task. So there are ways to run cover 3 that maybe don't ask that of them, like cover 3 cloud, which has one of those corners still playing underneath, and then 2 safeties take 2 of the middle third zones. And then you do have to have one corner playing the other middle third zone, but that guy could maybe be Byron Murphy, who's actually pretty good at that and has done invert cover 2 a whole bunch. They did a lot of this inverting last year. I'm not suggesting anything that isn't already clearly part of Flores' playbook, because they ran it at least last year. I'm just talking about tweaking the ratios a little bit. I've got some other miscellaneous questions that I'm going to get to next, so that's all coming up. Today's Locked On Vikings Twitter Tuesday episode is brought to you by Gametime, the best place to find last-minute tickets. Let me tell you, I went and checked World Series tickets because I live in LA, and we were thinking about maybe trying to see just how bad it would be. $1,200. It's tempting to maybe splurge, but we'd have to find a way to scrounge that up for nosebleeds in Dodger Stadium. Be pretty cool. But whatever it is, whether you're trying to get to an upcoming Vikings game, Vikings Colts just flexed to Sunday night. If you're trying to get that, last minute tickets is what Gametime does best. They are all over the resale market, finding exactly the things that are there for you. But even if you don't know what you want to do this weekend, Gametime can curate an experience for you, finding a very cool opportunity, finding a great deal for you, and you can go have fun on a budget, whether it's sports, concerts, comedy, theater. The more open-minded you are, the better a deal you're going to get. So check it out at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Wrapping things out here on the Locked On Vikings podcast, we have a few more questions in this Twitter Tuesday mailbag. The next one comes from Still Dewey, who asks, from what we have seen this season, where are Sam Darnold's strengths and weaknesses? My layman observation is that he is struggling in crucial situations when the pressure gets to him. So this, I could spend a whole podcast on this topic, so I'll go through just a couple of big ones, but I think strength-wise, he has been pretty accurate. There are more accurate QBs in the league, but he has been absolutely dealing on deep balls, especially deep balls over the middle. You know, a couple of really explosive post routes probably come to your mind immediately. He's absolutely dicing on those. I think there is something really valuable to the fact that he can throw to all levels of the field. All over the field, you really have to defend every blade of grass. That's really stressful to a defense, and that's not something that every NFL quarterback has. And he has been, for the most part, when he's on with, rhythm and timing, he's doing really well. He's not always there, and there's maybe a consistency angle if we want to talk weaknesses, but really the big weakness is just the bozo stuff. I think that the moment gets to him a little bit sometimes when the momentum of the game kind of feels like it's falling away. When the game feels like it's slipping away, or when it feels like a comeback attempt is starting and he feels like he has to force the issue, that's when the dumbest stuff happens. Or when a mistake happens, right? When, you get somebody pulled that wasn't supposed to, and he's in the way of your toss play, and you get like a stupid thing where he hooks it over and he gets that big fumble. Like that kind of stuff comes out of Sam Darnold all the time. I think he's not careful enough with the ball. Right. So you're going to get one or two really bad looking turnovers every game. And maybe the other team drops a couple of them and you get lucky, but you're giving them those opportunities, and that's bad. But I think so far, all of that has been really, really worth it, because down to down, when Darnold does make the right decision, he's very opportunistic. He's really good at punishing just if your safety's just a little too flat footed. That big long one to Jordan Addison in this game, that was kind of a psycho throw to make. You're throwing, right over a deep half safety. That guy's supposed to be getting on, that guy is supposed to let nothing behind him. That's his whole job. And you're basically challenging him on that. But they caught him just a little bit flat-footed, just a little bit of hesitation. And Sam Darnold goes, ooh, I got it. So that aggression and that greed really helps you there, but it can hurt you in other times. I could go on with that forever. But let's move on to a question from the child, who asks, is there any explanation as to why Dallas Turner barely played this week, especially considering the way our defense kept getting beaten by generally obvious plays? Gink. The answer is Andrew Van Ginkel. And Patrick Jones also having a great time, but the answer is that Andrew Van Ginkel taking him off the field is becoming less and less of a good idea because of how well he's been playing this year. Kevin O'Connell was pressed on this a little bit in a press conference on Monday, and he was like, no, this dude's going to be an absolute monster for us. He's developing. We're taking him along, and we've got a lot of dudes in that room, which kind of matches with my perception. Like I look at, okay, well, Patrick Jones needs to get his reps, and you can't take Van Ginkel and Jonathan Grenard off the field like half the time or anything. You got to have those guys on the field at least 75% of the time. So you only got 25% of the snaps left to go around, and you got Patrick Jones, you have Jihad Ward, who's been playing well, Dallas Turner. How do you split that up? And I think if Dallas Turner is getting shouldered out by those guys, they're playing well enough that it's not really a concern to me. And when he does go in, what I see is not concerning either. So I have no reason to be worried right now. Peter asks, is our lack of success in drafting starting to catch up to us? Over the last 3 drafts, we've had good draft capital, yet the only contributors we've come away with are a solid wide receiver 2, a mediocre right guard, and a kicker. The 2022 draft went bad, and around year 3-4 is when I think the impacts of those are the most felt, because that's when those would be superstars on a cheap deal, like what the Ravens have in Kyle Hamilton, right? They're not paying him. They're getting great stuff out. So that's like where the real impact would be felt. And the lack of that really sucks. I do think that the problems that came out of that 2022 draft, at least at safety, the Vikings have kind of lucked out, because during the time where Lewis Cine was busting out, Metellus blows up, Cam Bynum blows up. So they're feeling really good about those guys. And neither of those guys are expensive very much at all right now either. Obviously missing out on Booth really hurts. They're having all these problems with cornerback, and they're having these problems in coverage, and the amount of talent they have at quarterback might be the main reason why they're not making the adjustments that are otherwise obvious to make. So that one might be hurting them a little bit, but I also think people really undersell those drafts. There's Jalen Naylor came in those drafts, Ty Chandler, and plus maybe the most impactful thing they did with their draft capital, which is get TJ Hawkinson. And part of the reason that like the 2023 draft doesn't have as much impact is because they spent stuff on a guy with a lot of impact, just not a rookie, which would be a weird hair to split if you were really going to try to go there. I would imagine Mekhi Blackmon would be a very important piece right now if he didn't get hurt. There's nothing you can do about that in your draft eval. And also, I don't think that getting like massive contributions out of all of your rookies is something we should really, is a healthy thing to necessarily expect. Luke, and I promise this isn't me, maybe it is, maybe I sleepwalked, and I posed the question, is it time to put some respect on Will Reichard's name? Yeah, speaking of drafting. I remember you thought the use of a 5th on him was too steep, but the Vikings have had an advantage in kicker in almost every game they've played thus far. Yeah, so here's what I'll say. I think Will Reichard has shown so far to absolutely have been worth a 5th-round pick. The reason that doesn't really move me off of my don't draft kickers thing is because for every Will Reichard, there are like 6 Zane Gonzalez's. and so if we're going to talk about playing the odds, if we're going to talk about, the next team that has an opportunity to draft a kicker, and should they, it doesn't really make it feel like much of a better idea if you hit one every, 6 or 7 attempts that there's like the greatest kicker ever is coming out of college. Like, yeah, okay. Which one is this though? Is this a Will Reichard or is this a Roberto Aguayo? There are too many like that, but yeah, Will Reichard's been fantastic. The value has absolutely been worth a 5th-round pick. So if you could guarantee that a kicker would work out, it'd be totally worth drafting him. Therein lies the issue. Luke Brown's Vols Burner asks, there were times Goff checked into a play when Minnesota gave a cover 0 look. Is this just going back to dagger instead of a run or something else? Can the defense not also respond when it's that obvious what the offense is doing? So the thing about when a quarterback cans is that you don't know what they're canning from to what they're canning to, right? They could have had a shot play called that, if you see too high, you have to can out of it and into a run. Or you could be canning into a screen if you see a certain front. There's a lot of different reasons that you can go from one play to the next. For the Vikings, most of what teams do, is that they have a blitz counter, and if you see a blitz look, you can into the blitz counter. And so what the Vikings do, so the answer is yes, they can, and they absolutely do. What you'll see is that when the opposing quarterback goes can, the Vikings will say some signal to each other, which maybe kills the blitz or maybe dials up a blitz, depending on what they think the other team will be generally doing with their cans. They've all studied each other on this. And then maybe the other quarterback will say reload, which brings the first play back in, and you'll play that little cat and mouse for as long as the offense wants to before they snap it. But yeah, that's absolutely a cat and mouse game, and what's actually going on and how much of it is fake, and did you just kind of look at each other and like make a weird hand signal and that means nothing, and trick the offense into canning into something. Like, there's all kinds of gamesmanship to it. Benjamin asks, has everyone jumped the gun on this year because of the legitimately hot start and Vikes are just ahead of schedule? Assuming a few big things like J.J. McCarthy being better than Darnold and Flores staying another year, aren't the Vikings' best Super Bowl chances in 25 or 26? I don't want to go all in before JJ. So I think you're talking about trade deadline stuff. And the thing about trade deadline stuff is the Vikings the only significant draft capital they can go spend is a first rounder. And if you're spending a first rounder on the trade deadline, you're probably not getting a rental. You're probably getting somebody that is, going to be, even if you don't have team control, you probably intend to extend them. And I don't know who that would be, but, TJ Hawkinson was acquired at the trade deadline. That was a long-term decision. It was just made midseason. That wasn't an all-in thing that they made just to win the Super Bowl in 2022. It helped them in 2023, and when he's back, it's going to help them this year and beyond, and then they extended him. So if we're going to do something at the trade deadline, I think I agree with you. It has to be for that. Just pouring a bunch of resources into 1 year. We've seen too many bad ref calls in NFC Championship games to like think that that's a good idea, right? Like, you can't be that team. So if they do, but that's not a reason not to do something. It just means it has to have long-term efficacy as well. Last one is from Purple Nurple, who asks, why do Vikings fans think the season is over when we're 5-1 and just lost by 2 points to Super Bowl favorites? I don't know who's saying the season is over. The division odds went down a lot because obviously the Lions are good and now they have a step toward the tiebreaker in the division, which makes it more difficult to go win the Super Bowl and all that stuff. But like, boy, if you're like packing it in after that one, you are weak-willed. You might not be cut out for Minnesota Vikings fandom, and that's all right. That's valid, but go take your Sundays back, I guess. I will see you all tomorrow. We're going to have a crossover with Locked On Rams tomorrow. We'll have it on Thursday, so we'll do our normal thing on Wednesday and talk about some film stuff, some of the stuff that I noticed, maybe some inner Sam Darnold, some really deep Sam Darnold stuff or something like that. Whatever it is, I will see you for it. I love you. And as always, Skol.